This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
And you have arrived at the crypt.
The mausoleum.
At the graveyard. At the tomb. That's right, folks. You have arrived at the Creep Street Podcast.
Whoa.
That's right. Now, I know we all want to dive into Volume 2 of our story, so I'm just going to quickly get the housekeeping out of the way, of course. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter or X at Creep Street Pod. We are also on TikTok at Creep Street Podcast. We've even got a wonderful Pinterest board that Maureen's been working on.
Thank you.
And of course, if this mainline show is not enough for you, then I got something. I got the salve.
Thank God.
You just head on over to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast.
Okay.
Yes, once again, patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast for all sorts of goodies. You can find a tier that fits you. And let me tell you something. No matter what tier you get, you have already got, going on now 4 years of content.
Are you serious?
So even if you sign up for the $2 tier, you're getting every $2 tier thing that's come out for 4 years.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Think about it like that. And same with the $5 and $10 tiers.
Whoa, thank you for pointing this out to me. This changed my mind and I'm joining.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, folks, put on your bibs. Grab the chair, pull up to the table.
Yep.
It's dinner time.
Technically speaking, this is a barbecue.
In the worst kind of way.
Yeah.
And I know our jokes are a little macabre.
You gotta try to keep it light.
Because tonight's episode is going to be grizzly.
Yeah, this is another one where we are throwing out one of those. We don't usually do it, but we're doing it. A trigger warning up top.
Yes, and trigger warning for those of you that don't like a deep, gravelly voice.
Oh, yes.
I've been a little under the weather, and my voice actually sounds better than it did.
Yeah.
And I'm sure talking for the next few hours will do it wonders.
It's going to be good. It'll definitely be it's going to be a net positive.
That's right. Luckily, this is a Momo-led episode, so she'll be steering us through the pass, through the Sierra Nevadas.
Yes.
Maureen, what is tonight's episode?
Tonight, well, first of all, thank you, and I hope you feel better. Tonight, we are heading back over to check in on The Donner Party, Volume 2. So, we're heading back. We're going west. For most of us. Some of us it's east, but most of us it's west.
Let me tell you something. Volume 1 set up the pins. Volume 2 is bowling them down in gruesome, grisly fashion.
Yeah, it's a lot, this one. It's a lot.
Truly, this is a tragedy.
This is... It's almost like you kind of... At least for me, sometimes I notice, like, I kind of subconsciously, like, take a step away from it. Like, I try not to, like, fully accept it that it's real, almost.
Right.
It's almost like I kind of... Sometimes I'll be thinking about it, and I'm thinking of it like it's a narrative, like it's a story, you know?
Right.
And then I'll have to think about it again and be like, oh, no, this... for sure happened.
Yeah.
And honestly was probably worse than what the book says, because
Truly.
I'm sure the survivors didn't say everything.
This was truly an unfortunate tragedy
Yeah.
that led to a grisly end. And we are hearing about it tonight. Maureen,
Yeah.
let's hit the trail.
Let's go. Just two things. One, I want to quickly say, even though there are moments of extreme tragedy and we can see what humanity can come to, at the same time, there are moments of like amazing courage and strength and heroism and stuff. So look forward to that too.
Yes, in many ways, it even though it's vastly different, it makes me think of our recent episode on the Nederlander and the Iroquois Theater fire, and how, despite this awful tragedy, there was heroes in the midst of the people there, and there was some heroic deeds done, even in this awful situation.
For sure. I didn't actually say the trigger warnings earlier, so just to be thorough, here we go. Trigger warning for accidental death, death of a child, cannibalism, extreme trauma, and I think that's it.
Yes, and of course murder and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And as you know, we said it last time, we don't really give trigger warnings because Creep Street, it's just inherent to the type of show it is.
Right, and usually like on each topic you can just tell if it's something that you will be okay with or not. So it's like, it's pretty obvious,
Exactly. If it's about a serial killer, you can expect there's going to be some awful things. But this is particularly awful in certain ways, and so just a good old heads up.
And one more shout out, of course, to our sources. We've got Donner Dinner Party by Nathan Hale. And then our main source today is The Indifferent Stars Above by Daniel James Brown. You sounded like a fucked up Tim Allen, in a good way. Okay, so we're heading back. Okay, let's return to what is modern day Nevada, kind of close to Reno. But today, Reno is a good time. It's beautiful, lots of good stuff going on. But in today's story, it's just fucked.
So prior Reno 911.
Prior Reno 911, prior New Boot Goofing.
There is no New Boot Goofing in this one.
Unfortunately, there's just no new boots.
No.
Let alone goofs.
In fact, I think they probably ate their boots.
They literally did.
They literally ate their boots.
They ate their boots and they said, I'm sorry, goofs, you're going to have to wait until probably a long time until I'm ready to laugh at anything again.
Yeah.
So that's sad. So when we last left our group, the Donner Party, last week, our pioneers had made camp in 3 separate zones, but pretty much like not too far away from each other. Basically, it's that same thing we were talking about before, where it's like the whole wagon train wouldn't be all together the whole time. They kind of would like accordion back and forth. And because of the snow, they just ended up having to not all be together.
Right.
But all of them were not far from Truckee Lake once they realized that they could not get through the Sierra Nevada, and they were fucked. So it was on November 3rd, 1946, when they woke up and they were surrounded and covered by snow. That's where we ended last week.
Not a good thing.
Yeah, in fact, one of the first people to wake up, looked around and started screaming because they thought they were the only one there. Like, they thought everyone had left them or, whatever.
Right.
But then after they screamed, like, people started sitting up and being like, what? And they were all just, like, under the snow. I don't know how they slept, but in a way, it's scary that they were able to sleep because that'll show you how easy it is to freeze to death.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And snow would cause major problems for the Donner Party. By the end of this saga here, they will have withstood at least 10 different blizzards.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Oh.
I know. And that either took place with the people either at the camps waiting, or we'll see later, to the people that went out on a rescue mission. Now, the snow at certain places was 20 to 30 feet deep. In fact, if you go by where Truckee Lake and everything is today, you'll see that there are a lot of trees that are cut like really high up. Like the stumps are really tall. And when you first see it, you're like, how did this even, like, why would someone do this? That looks so strange. And it's because when they were there cutting down trees, like for firewood and stuff, that's where they were standing. That's how high the snow was.
Incredible.
Yeah. And not just, it's normally really snowy in this place, not just that alone, but this was actually one of the coldest winters, not just in the Sierra Nevada, not just in the West, not just in the United States, but the whole Western Hemisphere.
Wow. That's something I didn't know.
Yeah, I know. In fact, in Nebraska, around 600 Mormons, this was also really right around prime, Mormon time heading to Utah too.
Right.
So it's kind of, comes up with it. Like, in fact, I think I can't remember off the top of my head, maybe Joseph Smith left like the year after this happened or something. Wow. It was near here. So anyway, in Nebraska, around 600 Mormons died after a bunch of blizzards, and they were stuck in kind of a similar situation.
Wow, and this was the same winter as the Donner Winter?
Yes.
Wow.
And some people even say that this cold winter was one of the culprits for the Irish potato famine.
Really?
Yes, like it was part of what caused the blight, like the disease of the potatoes.
Wow.
I don't know, if that's proven or if that's just a theory. I'm not really sure. And, we got to say, of course, it wasn't a famine. It was a genocide, but that's a story for a different day.
1846. Wow. What a crappy year.
Yeah, you hate to hear it. So the Breens, they all found an abandoned cabin that was there, and that's where they kind of huddled up, and that's where their family stayed. But to be clear, though, this wasn't like someone's great cabin that was like their permanent home that they found. That was like warm and well insulated, at least for the time and whatever. This was like someone else who had been kind of trapped there and needed to just make camp for a longer period of time, made it.
Oh.
So it's like the bare minimum. It's basically just walls. They even had to make a new roof.
I'm thinking of the show Yellow Jackets.
I wrote that in my notes so many times where I'm like, this is just like Yellow Jackets.
Yeah.
They must have, those writers. They're always doing research. I'm glad they're getting paid more. Yeah, but I'm sure they, looked into this because there's a lot of similarities. And also, at the same time, too, it's kind of just, a lot of this is just human nature, too, when we are in moments in, like, super stressful life or death situations like these. Like, we'll see later, it's just, it's like, it's truly a scientifically experimented and proven fact that, to put it into layman's terms, we go cuckoo after a while when we are stressed and don't have food.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's what the science is telling us, so we'll see that. So anyway, the Breens, they found this cabin. That's where they stayed, but they did still have to make a roof or replace the roof, and they had to kill like a bunch of their oxen to even make the roof because they had to like get their hides, and then on top of the hides they put pine boughs on top to help insulate it.
Right.
The Foster/Eddies/Pike families, they built their own kind of cabin thing up against a huge boulder, and they crammed 16 people in there. That's insane.
Yeah.
The Reed and the Graves family, they shared a cabin. They made their own, once again, similar to the Breens cabin, just, a quick temporary structure. And the way they made it was kind of like where I went to college. Some of the dorms were like this. I don't know if it's common, where it's like, it's one room, but then there's a wall that goes like 3/4 of the way down. It's like almost two separate rooms, but there's no door. Do you know what I mean?
I think so.
Yeah.
Now, where's old Jimmy Reed in all this? Old James Reed.
So he's out.
He's in Cali.
He's buying land. And I don't remember if I said this last week or not, but at this point, he's fighting in the Mexican-American War.
That's right.
Yeah, he's fighting at this time. Probably at this exact moment, really.
There is an irony of, obviously we learned in the last episode, he got into a fight, pulled out his knife, stabbed the guy to death. He gets banished, and he's the fucker who makes it to California.
Exactly.
Way before them.
Way before them. And also, this was kind of all his fault. He was the one that was like, no, we should really take Hastings cut off. Like, no, let's not listen to the warnings from my friends and the entire community. Like, this was his fault.
Yeah.
And he was the one that got out, like, first. So yeah, that sucks.
Oh, Jimmy Reed, you SOB.
And then over a little bit further back, it's about 5 miles away at Alder Creek. That's where the actual Donners were staying, as well as the Kessebergs, and I think maybe some other people get thrown in and out of there, I think, too, but I think that's that. And you may remember, too, that there are a good amount of single men here as a part of the Donner Party, too. And this is what's so sad, but it's how they decided to do it, or, I don't know. All of the single men were basically just shit out of luck. They had to just sleep outside. They didn't even have tents. So they were just like sleeping out in the freezing cold and had no kind of shelter at all. And it sucks because a lot of them were employees of these people. So you would hope that, the employers would invite them in. But then I don't know if there was some kind of like decorum or etiquette that maybe we just don't understand today, where it was like these men wouldn't be in that close of proximity to like women and kids. I don't know. I don't know if the men tried to and the family said no, or if the men were like, no, it's like, we agree we should not be in there. I don't know, but they were fucked.
Well, they didn't even want the single guy to go ahead for supplies because he wouldn't have a reason to come back. Remember that?
I know.
Which is kind of like, fuck you.
But he did come back, though.
Yeah.
We love that. But the group over here in Alder Creek, the Donners, as well as a few others, they were really especially fucked right away. Their wagon tipped over somehow, and while they were making repairs, George Donner, technically the head of the party, he cut his hand pretty bad. Unsurprisingly, but sadly, it got infected. And as we mentioned a little bit last episode, infections were so bad back then.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in this kind of situation where there's absolutely pretty much nothing you can do. Like, there's no doctor around, and these people don't really know what kind of like plant medicine or folk medicine to do necessarily to like try to even address that. Like, living in this time period was so hard alone, let alone being in this situation in this time period.
Yeah.
So it got infected, so that sucks. Spoiler alert, it stays here the rest of the time. He never gets rid of it. It's very painful. It causes confusion, low body temperature, which is already bad. And then he has like a nasty smelling, like leaking sore.
Oh, God.
So it's not great. And also, I don't know if I said this before, the Donners here, they tried to build a cabin, but they couldn't because it was snowing too much. So they were just like, okay, temporarily we'll just set up tents and then we'll make a cabin soon. But they never were able to, and they just stayed in tents for the rest of this story. So there were so many oxen and cattle at the beginning of our story, like a truly kind of insane amount. Like maybe I would even say an irresponsible amount.
Yeah.
But maybe it is responsible because you got to have, stuff to, sell or whatever once you get to California. It's tough. So anyway, so many of them had died along the way, and so many of them, and this is so sad, were just kind of abandoned in the snow because they couldn't really get them through. They didn't have a lot to kind of lean on for food. And even the ones that they did have that they could slaughter to eat, they were so malnourished and starving that the meat from them barely had any nutrients in it. So they would run out of food in just a few weeks, and they knew that. One man, he was able to catch a few things at first. It was just a squirrel, an owl, and even a coyote, but that was really just at the beginning, and then that was it. That really was just used to feed his own family. It really wasn't like shared among everyone. And I know this seems harsh, but that was really what people had to do, and you can't really blame them. There were, of course, acts of great generosity and helping out each other, of course, but when push comes to shove, it's like, are you gonna feed your kid?
Yeah.
Or someone else's kid?
Of course.
And
right.
like that sounds terrible. Or like your kid, or like this man that you met a couple months ago.
Right.
You know, it's like, it's awful, but that's really, people had to make those decisions. And also, I don't understand how this happens, and I think about this just in general too, outside of this situation, and I'm sure there's some kind of scientific reason, so reach out and let me know. Everyone here was just perpetually damp and gross because of the melting snow and everything. That I understand. But what I don't understand is people were getting lice, fleas, and even bed bugs.
How are they living in that cold?
That's what I mean. Like, and where did they come from? Like, where did the bed bugs start? I guess, do they come from nature at first, and now I just think of them as they only live in apartments?
That is actually interesting. You never think of bed bugs in like a natural setting.
Well, anyway, they got in there, and so that sucked too. So they were dealing with that. It smelled bad. They were uncomfortable. It fucking sucked right from the top. Now, at this point, there were 81 people in the party, and about half of them were kids. So that really ups the stake factor here because first of all, the obvious reasons. And then also, you know, they didn't ask for this and they don't understand even what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's like you want to get them out of this as soon as possible. And that's really what pushed a lot of the adults through. They were like, I will try anything if it means saving my kid.
Of course.
Which,
yes.
Of course. Now, Franklin Graves, we mentioned him last episode. He was from Illinois originally, and he was the first guy that, you know, after they made their shelters and whatnot, he was like, we cannot just stay here. We're going to die. We need to send a group of people ahead, and we need to get help or provisions or whatever. And Franklin was really he stepped up. You know, he was like, you know, George Donner is in the other camp and also frankly dying. So like, he's not a stepfather. He was the father that stepped up.
Okay.
But really he was. So he started talking to everyone and being like, hey, let's get some people going. We got to get out of here. So a group of people came together and they also decided who was going to go. They were very logical about it. They were like, we need to make sure enough men stay back so that they can chop wood for the women and the kids and stuff like that. So it wasn't just like all the able-bodied men left. Like they really thought this through about like who would go and who wouldn't. So they began to try to get through what would be known eventually as Donner Pass. And this is really just like the beginning of their journey out there. It's not like they got miles and miles away. They really were just starting and they couldn't do it. There was just too much snow, and a lot of the snow was that powdery shit.
That fresh powder, baby.
Yeah. Ooh, that pow-pow, that fresh pow. So at this point, it's looking really grim. The single men now, they are at the point where they are eating mice if they can find them. And not just like if they find a mouse and they eat it, which you can't blame them. It's better than nothing, obviously. They're like fighting, like scratching and clawing at each other.
Yeah.
To get a mouse.
Yeah.
That's like so haunting that image is just so scary to me. And they also had come down to eating strips of buffalo hide from their clothes.
Right. That's the thing. I feel like we talked about it in a past episode where someone was stranded and they boiled their leather down to essentially it's almost like a jelly or something.
Yeah. And funny you mentioned that, Dylan, that jelly. That's what this is. They would kind of boil it down. I think it was essentially like untreated leather that you boil down. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, God forbid anyone listening to this is ever in a situation like this. I'm pretty sure like the leather we get today for like a leather jacket or something, this wouldn't work because it's like treated in a certain way now that they didn't do at the time or something. I could be wrong. If you really want to try to eat your Doc Martens, you can, but I would just recommend not trying it because it might not work.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, they basically would just boil it down, just boil it until it kind of becomes this fucked up jelly.
Yeah. And it don't taste like Smuckers, folks.
Not at all. It's not like my precious, my lovely, wonderful raspberry jam.
Yeah.
In fact, this was so gross and whatever, like they usually would use this substance as glue. And I'm not talking like fucking Elmer's glue, you know what I mean? But the glue that they're eating isn't that. This glue is inedible. Elmer's is too, but you won't die from it. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is bad. Now, their bodies at this point were really going through it. They were just eating a very horrible diet, obviously. Essentially, they're eating like just meat, or they're having like fucking, like their blankets.
Yeah.
So that's not good. They're having to deal with that. It's freezing outside. And keep in mind, too, they just walked across the fucking country.
Yeah.
So these people probably have like 0% body fat. Like they're fucking models. Okay.
Yeah.
Like they're like skinny legends.
I mean,
like they're hot.
Let's be real. As awful of a tragedy as it was, everyone was hot.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Of course. No, but really at the top, what I'm truly is they were in good shape, of course, but it wasn't like they were, like lifting weights, getting huge.
Yeah.
It was like they just
We're hard workers.
yeah,
and
just
naturally-
were walking for,
Right.
a long ass time.
Right, and especially if you're fixing wagons, doing, chopping wood. I mean, damn. Taking off their shirt, wiping the sweat off their brow.
You get why they would sometimes have a little romp in the grass.
Little hanky-panky out in the woods.
Oh, yeah. At this point, I at least hope to God that had stopped, though. At a certain point, sex is inappropriate.
Well, I mean, when you have festering wounds all over your body.
Right, that's what I mean.
It's hard to,
Get where you want to go.
Yeah.
But what I was saying, though, was even though they were in very good shape, they didn't have a ton of muscle mass. And they also didn't really have a lot of fat. So they got cold right a fucking way, and they started losing weight
Yes.
right the fuck away.
And keep in mind, they haven't even, as awful as it is, haven't even reached the point where it goes beyond just someone being, I guess, quote unquote, skinny to someone literally looking like a ghost, like literal flesh and bone.
Yes. So in order to just stay alive, just to try to keep their bodies warm, they were burning through a lot of calories. Now, there's a whole math problem that you can do. I am horrible at math on the best day when I'm doing addition. So I didn't even give this a whirl. But yeah, there's a math equation you can do to kind of figure out if there's someone's like a certain height and a certain weight, about how many calories they need in a day just to like survive. Like if they're just literally laying down in bed all day long, not doing anything. And for Sarah Graves, for example, I don't remember exactly what they said her weight was, but I think they said she was maybe like 5'5" or something like that. And then I don't remember the weight exactly, but it was, like we said, lower because of their journey so far, but not like crazy low, not dangerously low or whatever.
Right.
She needed like 1,600 calories to literally just lay down and not die. And she's, she was a smaller woman. Like, for these other people too, like, they will need a lot more calories to just survive.
Yes.
And they're not really getting anything, so it's wild.
Right.
But I want to read a quote here too from the book, just to kind of address some questions some people may have, because some of you out there may be like, people have survived for a long time without eating. Like, what the heck? Here we go. It is possible, under certain circumstances, to live for a very long time with very little food, or even no food. Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, Jews, Hindus, and American Indians, just to name the most obvious examples, have all at various times in history embraced extended fasting as a means of attaining heightened levels of spirituality. Saints of various sorts have fasted for months. In the 19th century, so-called hunger artists often fasted for 20, 30, or in one case, 44 days without apparent harm to themselves. In 1981, the IRA's 27-year-old Bobby Sands survived 66 days on a hunger strike before he died. Another 27-year-old man in Scotland survived an astonishing 382 days on nothing more than water, potassium, and sodium supplements. His trick? He started his fast weighing 456 pounds. Paradoxically, though, you may starve to death in as little as 2 to 3 weeks. It all depends on the math.
Now, I know this is more just a kind of a rhyme, but I'd always heard there's like that rule of 3. It's like 3 weeks without food.
Oh, yeah.
3 days without water, 3 minutes without air, something like that.
Oh.
I could be saying it wrong.
But essentially that, I think that's a good rule to stand by.
Yeah.
Like to,
Or something like that. Because obviously there's people who can hold their breath for like...
Oh, yeah.
And obvious, it's... I just remember being told that when I was young. It was like a rule of 3.
Right. It's also a comedy rule.
There you go.
Not that you survive, but that jokes are in 3s. So, by mid-December, Franklin Graves was ready to try again. It says in the book, he rates it very well. Once again, shout out to this book, Indifferent Stars Above. Highly recommend you read it. But, he says that Franklin Graves couldn't just sit there and literally watch his children just waste away. Like, he just couldn't handle it. He was like, I can't just not do anything. So, he's like, we're going. Let's do it. And what was good about Franklin, too, was that he grew up in Vermont. So he knew about snow and winter and the mountains. Like, he was able to read weather better than the rest of them because he knew kind of what the clouds meant in the mountains. It's a little bit of a different vibe. And also, very importantly, he knew about snowshoes and he knew how to make them. So he put together another squad, and this group was known as the Forlorn Hope. They kind of fucked themselves with the name, I would say, but you can't hate on them for that. So this group was 17 people strong. There were 10 men, 5 women, and 2 kids. And they all, made their snowshoes, except for one of the kids didn't have snowshoes. They hoped that he was just light enough that he would be able to keep mostly on top of the snow. And they were like, this is it. Like, we are going. We're not coming back. We're going and we're getting help or we're dying trying. Get Rich or Die Trying, starring 50 Cent.
Also, if you find help, obviously if you can, try to go back and get the others, but also maybe stay where help is.
No, yeah, that's their plan.
If there's a couple of houses or a little community, maybe make that your new fucking home.
And that's what they were planning on, and spoiler alert, that's what happens. They weren't planning on like getting there. Well, actually, maybe initially they did think they could do that, but it didn't work out. They would not be able to just get there and then come right back. They were like, we're getting there and we're laying down.
Yeah, at least till winter's done, then go to California.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, too. What's so crazy is once you cross the Sierra Nevada, like once you go over that, you're in California. Like, that's how close they are.
Wow. So it was truly like a final boss in a video.
Yes. It's like, that's what I mean when sometimes when I'm reading this or like talking about it, I'm like, it feels like it's a movie or a book or something, because like so many things happen to like give it like structure and like a fucking hero's journey, for Christ's sake.
Right. And it could just be how the well-written source too.
That is well. This book is so good. Yeah, they were very, very close to their final destination. Like once they, got to this fort, there was Sutter's Fort, but there was also the ranch. They were eventually then going to, go their separate ways and go to wherever they wanted within California, but still, their, essentially their final destination was like just over the mountains. So they continued on. They were like, this is do or die. One of the kids early on, the one without snowshoes, it became clear he couldn't do it. So he turned back early enough, but everyone else kept going.
How old is this child?
I think he's like 8. He's young.
Turned back, like there's, to the people who stayed behind.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the rest of the group, they did have a little bit of hope because they had Charles Stanton with him. He was that guy that had already done it once. He was the guy that like went ahead and got the supplies and came back, the single guy. And then there were the 2 Miwok guides, Louis and Salvador. So that helped a little bit, but still, they had no extra clothes, no tents, just the clothes they were wearing. They did really layer, but still, and light blankets and a little beef jerky. They thought they were only going to be traveling for 6 days.
Let me guess. They made it in 4?
Yeah, they made a really good time. No, it took them a month and a half. Yeah, they thought they had about a 30-mile journey ahead of them. It turned out it was a minimum of 75 miles.
Wow. I hope those Jack Link's jerky held up.
Yeah.
Hope those Slim Jims held up.
Come on. And it wasn't just a walk, too. And it wasn't even just a hike. There were cliff faces and, like, granite fucking, like, walls that almost seem vertical sometimes. Like, they were climbing. They were they were exerting a lot of energy doing this.
The whole while they're thinking, God, this granite would make a great countertop.
Yes. Mm-hmm. They said, my ancestors living in L.A.
Oh, they're going to love this
They're going to love this shit. And also, I forgot to, when I said before it was just one kid that turned around, it was actually two that turned around earlier to go back to the rest of the Donner Party. So now their group is down to 15. So now we got to talk about something that I didn't even really know about, and it's called snow blindness.
Yep.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, it's not just it's really bright because of the sun reflecting on the snow and just like the brightness hurts your eyes. That's what I always kind of thought it was. Like I didn't think it literally meant blindness, but that's not true. This is what it actually is. There's, a much deeper explanation you can get, of course, but the very simplest way I can explain it is there's ultraviolet light, a type of it, that bounces off of the snow and then hits your eyes. And this ultraviolet light that usually doesn't happen unless, there's snow because of the reflection, it affects the cornea and it makes you feel sick, have headaches, and it can make some people temporarily blind, but if it's bad enough, it can make you permanently blind.
Yeah.
And I've actually seen on TikTok, I've seen a few Inuit creators, and they have shown these really cool like snow blindness glasses, essentially. I don't know what they're actually called, but it actually looks like high fashion. It's basically like, I think they take a bone and they just like hollow out or etch out just like really small slits so you can like just see through, but it like keeps most of the sun out. It's very cool.
Wow. Almost like eclipse glasses or something.
Yeah. Here's the problem, though. This group didn't know about that. They didn't know that was an option. They didn't even know that that was going on. They just thought, why am I going blind sometimes? Like, isn't that horrifying?
Yeah.
Like, on top of everything else, you're just blind sometimes and you don't know why.
Yeah.
So they continued on, but it really just got more and more difficult. And not just the terrain, but also to even navigate where they were going. Usually they could kind of follow a path because there were so many wagons that had gone before them and they're heavy that there were, ruts in the ground where you could see where the wagon wheels had been turning. You can actually still see them in some places. But, with all this snow, they couldn't see, and also a wagon had never even gone through here. Anyone who had done it had just done it on foot or on a horse, and usually that was done in the summertime. And also, Louis and Salvador, they could help, but they barely spoke English. So there was a little bit of a language barrier there, and I'm sure none of these people spoke any Spanish, or barely any Spanish. Now, no hate here to Charles Stanton. We love him, a king of this story. He came back with the provisions. He didn't need to.
We stan.
We
Charles
do stan. So we mean the following with literally zero hate in our hearts. It's just the truth. It was a little hard because Charles was a little bit shorter. And actually for the time, I don't even know. Maybe he wasn't considered that short, but he was only 5'5". So
perfect for Hollywood.
Exactly. It's not like crazy short. It's just shorter.
Perfect for a leading man in Hollywood.
I mean, literally. So it's a good thing he's going to California. But because he was shorter, he had to exert a lot of energy to pick up his feet to move forward through the snow, even with his snowshoes on. And because he was lower to the snow, he was more susceptible to snow blindness. Now, of course, there were women and kids there that I'm sure were shorter than him, or at least as tall, but Charles Stanton was one of the leaders, so it's a little different with him. If he's really struggling, fuck. So, on the third day, they had made it about 14 miles, and that's 14 miles total since they left. At this point, they were hoping they would be, almost there, 32 miles in. But they still had about 50 miles to go. And very, very, very sadly, Charles Stanton started to drag behind the rest of the group. But he would catch up at night, kind of like what we were saying before about the wagon trains. They did that too. And that continued on, and then on the 5th day, everyone was getting ready for their trek, and Charles Stanton, he sat down with his pipe and told everybody to go ahead and that he would catch up with them. And when spring came, 5 months later, Charles Stanton's bones were found in a hollow stump nearby.
So he kind of didn't leave that spot.
No, I
had
think he died there, yeah.
And I wonder if even in that moment, even though he said, I'll catch up, he had kind of resigned himself.
I think he made the choice. He knew he wasn't going to make it and he didn't want to hold them back. So he just
That
stayed.
makes me want to cry. He, as far as we know, we can mark him as one of the heroes.
Yes, I think so, for sure.
Because you know what? The supplies he brought back, when
yeah.
no one fucking trusted him because he was single.
Yeah.
And I get it. When you're in a tough spot, obviously, he has no ties to bring him back.
I would not blame him if he didn't come back once he saw how hard it was to get through this year. I would not have blamed him for just being like, I feel bad, but I can't make it. Like, I won't survive. But since he did do it, bringing back those supplies probably saved everyone.
Yeah.
So he's a hero of this story.
Let's all give a little loving memory to Charles Stanton.
Pouring one out for a homie, our short king, Charles Stanton. So at this point, Lewis and Salvador were the quote-unquote leaders. So they got through what is called the 6 Mile Valley, and then they came upon a ridge. Now, if they had decided to climb up that ridge, not far, they really probably could have seen it from the top of the ridge, there would be a road that led to the closest settlement called Johnson's Ranch. It would have taken them 9 days total, including what they had already done, but they didn't. Lewis and Salvador were lost, and they guided them to go south because it looked much less daunting than climbing this big ridge, so they thought that was the right way. But unfortunately, they literally entered a 3,000-foot canyon.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that sucks because you'll see, spoiler alert, the people back, at Truckee Lake and in Alder Creek, they're not doing so great. It's just so sad that, and it's not their fault, of course, they were trying their best, but if the Forlorn Hope had got there and they climbed that ridge, they might have been able to save a lot more people. But unfortunately, it didn't happen.
Yeah. And obviously, this is not to say...
Oh,
because in that moment, who knows what the right choice? You think you're
Yes.
making the right choice,
Yeah.
and we can only now view it from above and just
yeah.
mourn
I know.
not just the loss of people, but the loss of chances.
I know, just you see that they're so close. That has happened so many times in this story where they're so close. They're almost there. They almost fixed it. And then to something that is not their fault, something they could not have known. It wasn't out of stupidity.
Right.
They missed it.
Right.
Earlier, there was stuff where they could have fixed it, but that was James Reed's fault. And, fuck
Right.
that guy. I mean, not fuck him. You'll see. But whatever. It's complicated. On December 22nd, their beef ran out. So they're worried. And on December 23rd, Patrick Dolan, he was one of the single guys. He was a friend of the Breens. He made a suggestion. He said that they should all draw straws to select one person that should die so that the rest of the group could eat.
Here we go.
Yeah.
This is the beginning of what everyone thinks of
Yeah.
when they think of the Donner Party.
Mm-hmm.
We have now reached
Yeah, it's happening.
that moment of desperation, of such darkness and hopelessness.
Yeah.
My God.
Yeah. And here's the thing, too. It's really easy to be like, okay, you had food, just a couple days ago. You're already, ready to kill and eat someone. What the fuck? But here's the thing. He doesn't know that. He just knows that people are dying at this point. Charles Stanton died. And they thought that he died of hunger. They thought he died of starvation. It only makes sense that he is, worried about this and is trying to, get ahead of it. He doesn't think it can get much worse than this, and it does, but he doesn't know that. So you gotta cut him some slack there. And also we'll see later, too, is that the people that are dying, they think they're dying of hunger, but they were probably actually dying of hypothermia.
Because it can manifest in many different ways.
Yeah. So everyone agreed, and they drew straws. It wasn't literally straws, obviously. They didn't just like have straws. You know, it's not like they didn't bring food, but they brought straws. I think they used like pieces of paper or something. But someone was selected, and that person was Patrick Dolan.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
The guy who brought it up in the first place.
He probably feels like a real fucking ass. Real idiot. But thankfully, or I guess, I don't know if it's really, I don't even know, but none of them had it in them to kill him. And very sadly, but accurately, William Eddy was there, and he pointed out that one of them was going to die soon anyway. And everyone was like, yeah. It's so, like, creepy. But not like they're creepy. It's just like, oh my God, that's crazy.
Right. Rather than kill, just wait till someone dies.
Someone dies, because it's going to be soon.
Right.
And then we'll eat them. So everyone knows, like, that's where we're going.
The stakes
Yeah.
just turned to steaks.
Oh, okay. So not long after that, someone was chopping wood for, firewood, and the handle broke, and the head of the axe flung back into the snow and was lost forever. So now they don't even have an axe to cut down wood or to, chop wood or anything. Now, very, very sadly, one of our heroes of this story who really got everyone together to do this, Franklin Graves, started dying. And before he died, he told his 2 daughters that were there, Sarah and Marianne, that they should eat him in order to survive. So that's tough. Now, as I mentioned before, everyone thought that everyone that was dying of hunger, but it was actually hypothermia. Now, there's one aspect of hypothermia this is, once again, very simplified, but essentially when you're getting super cold, your blood goes to your core to try to keep your organs warm. But eventually your body kind of gives up and the blood flows back into your limbs. And that will make a person all of the sudden extremely hot, which, you wouldn't think, but they do. And since they're like delirious and all whatever anyway, they don't really know what's going on. A lot of times they'll just start taking their clothes off. It's called paradoxical undressing. And Patrick Dolan, sadly, he did this on Christmas Day. He also tried to get out of the tent to run away. And the rest of the group tried their best to hold him back, but eventually he broke free and started to run. Now, this also sounds weird, but it is a thing. It is called terminal burrowing. I don't know if it's like your body's last shot at like trying to get away from where you are to like get to a safer location or to get help. I don't know. Or if it's like an animal instinct to go and die away from others. Like, I know that's a thing, I think, for cats. They do that. So I don't know if that's a thing. Like, that's also what's happening here, or if that's totally separate. I don't know. If you know, let us know. But eventually they got Patrick Dolan back, but it wasn't long until he passed away as well. Now, I don't know what exactly happens to livers when someone has not eaten for a long time. I don't really know the science of it, but somehow bodies start creating acetone. So everyone, all of a sudden, their breath started smelling like nail polish remover.
Wow.
Yeah, so that sucks. Then there was a young 13-year-old boy from the Murphy family. And one day he was trying to find wood and he found a mouse. And he was so hungry that he just put it in his mouth and he ate it alive, which is wild. But, he was going crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like we're shaming him. I mean, it was some straight up Ozzy Osbourne shit. But here's the thing. About 36 hours or so into starvation, the hunger pains usually actually kind of go away. Once again, there's a whole lot of science behind it that I don't understand, but your body kind of like just gets used to it. Not the lack of food, but just the pain. But once you eat, everything's kind of kicked back in, and all of a sudden you're like ravenous.
Right.
And that's what happened to this boy. He ate this mouse, and then he kind of went fucking crazy. And he started going up to everyone and biting them, and repeatedly saying, "Give me my bone, give me my bone, give me my bone." And very sadly, he died at 2 a.m. So at this point, there are 3 bodies at their camp. They hadn't walked for a few days because they were so weak. It's come to that time that the guys we were talking about before, they were desperate. So this is a lot. I know we did a trigger warning at the top, but we're going to do another one here. Just so you know, fast forward a little bit if you're just getting a little queasy. That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you're still here. Here we go. They began to butcher these bodies. And they were very careful to keep everything separate and very organized because they wanted to make sure that no one had to eat a member of their own family. Oh my God, that's so grim. They took out the heart, the liver, and the kidneys because they have the most nutritional value and, they're hearty. No pun intended. You gotta have a little fun. Also, there wasn't really much elsewhere on their body to even really eat. They roasted all of these organs on sharpened stakes. And once the smell hit, everyone became ravenous.
Oh, and you don't think about that. Yeah, there's the act of butchering this body, but then when you smell it.
Yeah, you lose the human connection to it because the animal in you takes over.
Yeah.
Not to be gross. And I don't really know how this was figured out, but it has been. Apparently, the smell of human flesh cooking actually smells very good. And it smells like pork.
That's what I've heard. I've heard that it's
Yeah.
It's very much, and I've heard the taste is similar as well.
So it wasn't like it was this nasty smell, and to be fair, it was a smell they recognized because it smelled like pork. So Luis and Salvador, they were like, no. They were kind of horrified at what was happening. But everyone else began to eat. They just didn't make eye contact with each other and cried as they ate. Now they took the rest of the meat, not to be crass, but they took the rest that they, could get, and they dried it so that they could bring it with them. But there was only enough meat for 4 days. So they lived off that as long as they could, but once that ran out, they started to eat their own shoes. And I don't think boiled, they didn't bring a pot, it's literally just shoes. So they continued on barefoot. The fucking pain. I can't even imagine that. And they weren't just barefoot, actually. They were kind of, at this point, almost nude because their clothes had rotted off because of the moisture and how wet they were. And often their clothes got snagged on sharp rocks, on tree branches, whatever. I went to Utah a couple years ago. I ripped my damn Adidas sweatpants.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah, I've been to Utah as well.
I tried to take a hike and I fucked around and I found out.
Yeah.
But actually, this is very sad and they must have been so cold. Now, a few days later, William Foster, he's like, hey, we should kill Luis and Salvador and eat them. And Luis and Salvador, I don't know how they found out. Some people think that maybe William Eddy told them, or they overheard, or they could just kind of figure it out. So they ran away. So now they had no guide or anything.
Well, yeah, I'd run the fuck away too.
Yeah, because, Luis and Salvador,
they weren't going to have guides if they fucking ate them anyway.
And also, just as they were, they had a lot better chance of surviving, making it happen because they're from the area. They were Miwok, and so they had a much better chance of surviving this than the rest of the people did. Eventually, they got below the snow line, meaning they kind of got to the ground. They weren't just walking on top of, feet and feet of snow. So they were finally able to look for game. So William Eddy and Marianne Graves, they go out, and shockingly, they find a deer, and even more shockingly, they succeeded in shooting it. And they followed it until they got to it. William Eddy slit its throat, quickly fell to their knees, and began drinking the blood. I don't remember if this was in the book or if I heard this somewhere else. I'm not sure, but there was a veterinarian in one of the concentration camps. I don't know if it was Auschwitz or if it was a different one during World War II. The veterinarian was a prisoner, but he was the vet for the Nazis, horses and shit. And so when he would go to check on the horses, take care of them when no one was looking, horses have a lot of blood. He would just take out a cup of blood and he would drink it. And then he would sneak a cup of blood out and give it to his family. And I think they survived because of that.
Wow.
So I don't think it's ideal, but you can. Then, that very same day, very unfortunately, with his wife, Sarah, by his side, Jay Fosdick passed away. Eventually, Sarah caught up with the rest of the group and told them that Jay had died, and immediately they asked her if they could go find his body and butcher it. And she said, "You cannot hurt him now," and they went ahead. So they got Jay's body, they cut off the head, the hands, and the feet, and they carried the torso, or I think some people call it the trunk, which I don't like that, but... Oh, and the arms and legs too, just not the, feet and hands. And they put that on their packs on their back, and they came back. And once they came back to camp, they saw that there was deer, venison, whatever. And they still roasted Jay's heart and ate it. So at this point, there was 7 people left, 5 women and 2 men. And regarding that, one of the Donner Party survivors actually said this about the differences between the men and the women. And this was what the survivor said about the men. "The deep stupor into which their calamities had plunged the most of them often changed to despair. Each seemed to see inevitable destruction and expressed in moans, sighs, and tears the gloomy thoughts over which their minds were brooding." Of the women, though, the survivor said, "Most of them manifested a constancy and courage, a coolness, presence of mind, and patience. The difficulties, dangers, and misfortunes which seemed frequently to prostrate the men called forth the energies of the gentler sex and gave them a sublime elevation of character, which allowed them to abide the most withering blasts of adversity with unshaken firmness."
Still couldn't chop wood.
Oh, fuck. That's a sick burn. You actually are right. But yeah, last episode I'd kind of mentioned how Sarah, she was able to appreciate the beauty around her. And there's actually a part in the book where Marianne, her younger sister, both of them are in the Forlorn Hope, the sister does the same thing. And even though they're in this terrible situation, she still sees the beauty of the landscape and how it's, so different from anything she had ever even seen. I think that's a part of it. I hate this because it's annoying when people say this, but it is true. It's like you have to stay positive,
Yeah. Even when you're forced to cannibalism, stay positive.
You just gotta say, it's okay. But no, it's like you gotta just try. You have to just try, I guess. So, eventually they reached the bottom of the canyon, but, like I said, they did not have any shoes, so they were so swollen and sore from the snow, and now they were getting scraped and cut from the jagged rocks. Now, William Foster, at this point, he's like, "Hey, let's kill Amanda McCutcheon," one of the women that was with them. And William Eddy, again, is like, "Motherfucker, no, she's a mother, and, one of her kids is back, with the rest of everybody, no." And then Foster is like, "Okay, let's kill Marianne and Sarah Graves." And Eddie is still like, "No." I guess it's said in some sources that, William Foster even started to try to, steal Marianne away from the rest of the group, kind of started to try to divert her away, to kill her. But William Eddy stopped it. Just a couple days later, they ran into Luis and Salvador, and a bunch of different accounts of what happened, but at the end of the day, Foster killed them, and everybody in the group ate their organs, and they dried the rest. And they continued on until they just happened to come upon a Native American tribe. It was a Maidu village, and when they walked in, children started screaming and crying when they saw them. They were hollow-eyed, gaunt, bloody, and literally moaning. And they had been eating human flesh, so they literally were zombies.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was bad. So members of the tribe gave them this acorn paste, and they were able to sleep in shelter for the first time in weeks. This was wonderful, of course, but they still had to keep going on. Oh, by the way, they did not tell the wonderful people here that helped them that they had just killed and eaten 2 Miwoks, by the way.
Yeah, of course not.
Yeah, they even had them still in their bags, but they thought better of telling them that. But yes, so eventually they had to continue on. And when they left, of course, it was absolutely pouring cold-ass freezing rain to the point where they had to stop and rest every 100 yards. And then after they had gone 2 miles, they couldn't do it. Their bodies just gave out. They could not continue. Except for William Eddy. another hero, he continued on by himself and made it to Johnson's ranch. They put him in bed and got him warm and started tending to him, thank God, and a rescue mission headed out. They followed his bloody footprints back to the rest of the group. The Forlorn Hope started with 17 and ended with 7. Now, the rescuers, though, they're like, all right, we're getting these people, but we got to go back to get everybody else. So they're like getting everything together. They're getting ready to go. They go. But we also need to remember that the people back with the rest of the Donner Party, they thought that this was going to take, 2 weeks to get any kind of, assistance. And it had been 5 or 6 weeks. So once the rescue party got to them, it was horrifying. They were in horrible shape. All of the single men that were still there died, except for one, I believe. And not long after that, Jacob Donner died as well. Margaret Reed, James Reed's wife, she had nothing because her husband was banished. So she was forced to feed her kids ox hides. And when that ran out, she had to give them discarded bones from other families. She just boiled them down until they could be chewed and swallowed. So the first relief, as it was called, the first rescue mission, they got to the rest of the Donner Party on February 18th. Cabins were under 20 feet of snow, and the area around the cabins, it was just littered with bodies and body parts. But you couldn't see the cabins because they were so low beneath the snow. To the point where when someone died in the cabin, they had to dig a ramp up to get them out of the house. And then at first they started burying the people within the snow, but then they didn't have enough energy and they were just out there. The rescue mission thought everyone was dead. They were like, this is awful. But one of them was like, hello? And not probably like that, probably not like Mrs. Doubtfire. I didn't mean to do that. But then one person popped their head out and said, "Are you men from California or are you from heaven?" Yikes. So they started tending to people, giving them food, but of course they had to be careful not to give too much food, to kill them. That is a thing. And they started getting ready to take people back. So 22 people were taken back in the first rescue mission. Really, really sadly, a 3-year-old girl named Ada Kesselberg, the daughter of Louis Kesselberg, she passed away. Now, the second relief then, not long after, was on their way. And who do you think the second relief was led by? Do you have any ideas?
Old Jimmy Reed?
Correct. He's coming back. Who would have thought? Who would have fucking thunk it? But the motherfucker is heading back, and he's like, all right, we got to get these people. And he actually wasn't a dick. He had raised, I think, $1,000, which in that time was a lot, from people in San Francisco to get, help with supplies and help with the cause. And he also somehow got the literal Navy to help too.
Wow.
So that's cool. So as he was going towards Truckee Lake and Margaret Reed, his wife, was going from Truckee Lake, they ran into each other. They embraced. They was amazing. They were so happy to see each other. They couldn't believe they both were alive. Margaret was like, the kids, some of our other kids are still back at the cabins. And he was like, I gotta go. He's like, I love you, my girl, but I gotta get our other kids. So they only got to be with each other for probably less than 5 minutes. So then the second relief party gets to Truckee Lake. They went into the Murphy cabin and there were just chewed on human bones and clumps of hair. And apparently it was a bunch of kids that had done that.
The kids had eaten the adults.
The kids had eaten the adults. Within the people within the Donner Party that were not part of the Forlorn Hope, no one had killed anyone. Everyone had just waited until someone died and then they ate them. But yes, these kids, they did. They ate some humans. They were the ones chewing on the bones, and yeah, it's a lot. So over at the Donner cabin, there were a lot of kids in there too. And Jacob Donner, very sadly, he passed away. But he also, I believe, gave his blessing, not that they would have really cared either way, to eat him once he went. And a lot of them ate him, including his own kids. So 3 adults and 14 kids were taken from that mission. Now, that mission, heading back, this was horrible. like so harrowing. I can't believe it's like they think they're saved and then they have to go through this. There was a terrible fucking blizzard that started on March 5th. And it was hard for them to even walk or do anything. They kind of had to just wait, and they made a fire. And the fire just kept going down and down and down. And I don't mean the flames like the fire was going out. I mean literally the campfire was sinking because the fire was melting the snow. So eventually the fire got to the bottom, got to the ground. So everyone was just kind of sitting in this pit within the snow, just once again close to death. Then, very tragically, Elizabeth Graves passed away, Franklin Graves' wife. At this point, James Reed, he was like, obviously this isn't working, so he went ahead to get more supplies and, all that. But then someone else died, and Mary Donner, who was 7 years old, she was the one that brought up cannibalism again. And she said, quote, "It's not that bad." That's tough. So Elizabeth Graves was eaten along with Isaac Donner. And then once another rescue party came upon them, they almost just left them there to die because they were so horrified by the scene. Just like mutilated bodies, they're bloody. People described them as demons, literally. Once again, not their behavior, kind of their behavior, but no one was like blaming them for that, but like they looked even like demons. So eventually, they thought better of it though, and they started bringing them back. They started rescuing them. There were a lot of kids there, and they were in really horrible shape. They could not walk. I mean, they were close to death. And this man, this is another fucking hero of this story. It literally makes me feel like I'm going to cry. I think it's so amazing. His name is John Stark. House Stark forever. That's non-negotiable. John Stark, he saved 9 kids just by himself because he would pick one kid up, he would walk a few feet, put them down, walk back, pick another kid up, walk a few feet, set them down, and this just kept going and going and going for 20 miles until all of them were saved. That's so incredible. So back at the camp, the main peeps back over at the fuckery, it was bad still, obviously. And Louis Kesselberg, the motherfucker that we hate, he was an abusive asshole. We all know this. He earlier had cut his foot, so he couldn't really help that much, especially at the beginning with, building shit and whatever. And I guess this kind of caused him to just lose it. Now, once again, this is another time I'm going to give a quick warning. This is a lot, and it's involving a kid. So if you need to fast forward, I understand. We'll get through this quick, though. So one night, Louis Kesselberg took the young George Foster, a young boy, into a bed and went to sleep. And in the morning, the young boy was dead. It's not clear if the boy just passed away on his own or if Louis Kesselberg killed him, but he just picked up the body and hung him on a peg on the wall like just an animal, and shortly thereafter was eaten. So then another relief party gets back to camp, and they're even more horrified by everything, and the young boy's dad, William Foster, was actually one of the people that came back. And William Foster was furious, and he almost killed Louis Kesselberg, but he said he had had enough of death, but that if he ever saw him in California, he'd kill him. So this relief party was getting ready to go, trying to figure out who was going to stay, who was going to go, and 4 people ended up staying back and waiting for a final rescue party, and that was Lavina Murphy, George and Tamsin Donner, and Louis Kesselberg. Now, Tamsin Donner was actually in fairly good health, all considering, but she refused to leave her husband's side. She would not let him die alone. And he was, the Donner that cut his hand earlier. He's survived this whole time, but he's not going to make it. So then, when a 4th relief party comes back, they find that Louis Kesselberg is the only one alive. They said that all of the bodies that had been around the camp, that still, they were just bodies, they weren't butchered. They came back and they all were. And Louis Kesselberg said that he ate those people but that Tamsin, she actually fell into a stream or a river or whatever, and she died. So he ate her then. But no one really believed him, and everyone thought that he killed her to eat her. Partially because he said that she was, quote, the best he'd ever tasted. So yeah, he was kind of getting into it, you know, like everyone else was like eating people, but just out of survival. And
Right.
Keseberg maybe he likes it a little. It's hard.
Right.
But this rescue mission, they also were coming back in order to get money, valuables, fabrics. There was a lot of people left a lot of money and stuff behind. So they wanted to get it so that the people that had been saved could, have a life in California. And also because they were going to get a little cut of it too. So they didn't fucking kill Keseberg, but they made sure they took everything from him because, of course, he was like hiding money and shit on him. And then they left. And Louis Keseberg was the last survivor of the Donner Party. Once they all got to California, it of course took a while for everyone to recover and rehabilitate. And it was hard because some of the families were totally decimated, like the Graves family. It left Sarah Graves, the oldest, who had started this journey with a husband and was excited to start a family of her own. Now she was left to take care of all of her younger siblings, including a baby girl who looked like, quote, a toy skeleton. But some families actually were fine. And once again, not fine, they all were, their lives were ruined, but they were alive. In fact, the Breen family lost no one. And Mrs. Breen even said, I have no one to thank but God, Stark, and Virgin Mary. Now, Hastings, famous of Hastings cut off himself, you may be wondering what happened to him. He actually had the bright idea to try to make a Confederate colony over in good old Brazil, but he died on the ship on the way there, which I think was for the best. And what's crazy is this story seems to be so long ago and so old, but one of the survivors of the Donner Party, they didn't die until 1934.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago. I mean, my grandparents were alive.
Yeah.
Like very much alive.
Right? Yeah.
Like I did have old grandparents, but still, that's just wild to me. Like 1934. Whoa. And there's another quote in here specifically about Mary Ann Graves, but I think it applies to everyone that survived. And this is touching on a little bit what we talked about before about, the attitude of the women and possibly why more of them survived than men. So here is a nice quote to talk about how humans survive in these horrible, heinous situations. The first time I read that she had taken the time to appreciate the view, to let her fancy wander to the images of a troop of Norwegian fur trappers roaming among icebergs, I wondered at the credibility of her report, and I wondered also about its implications. As it turns out, those implications might have been profound, at least for her. Survival psychologists have since discovered that the people who are most likely to live through extreme life and death challenges are those who open their eyes to the wonders of the world around them, even as their own lives hang in the balance. To appreciate beauty is to experience humility, to recognize that something larger and more powerful than oneself is at work in the environment. And humility, it turns out, is key to recognizing that in order to survive, you must adapt to your environment, that it won't adapt to your needs. So it seems that Mary Ann Graves carried an advantage with her as she crossed Donner Pass. Her attitude. She kept her eyes open. She did not deceive herself. She saw and touched, tasted, smelled, and heard everything that was happening around her and everything that might.
Wow, Maureen, thank you so much for preparing that.
My pleasure. My treasure.
Before we wrap up, I want to list the names of everyone who died.
Yes, thank you.
George Donner, age 62, died of either starvation or exposure, was cannibalized. Tamsin Donner, age 45, who knows how she died? She was cannibalized. Jacob Donner, 65, died and cannibalized. Elizabeth Donner died but not cannibalized. Isaac Donner, age 5, died and was cannibalized. Samuel Donner, age 4, died. Louis Donner, age 3, died. William Hook, age 12, died of overeating. John Denton, age 28, died. Milton Elliott, age 28, died and was cannibalized. Samuel Shoemaker, age 25, died and was cannibalized. Eleanor Eddy died at age 25. James Eddy, age 3, died and was cannibalized. Margaret Eddy, age 2, died. Luke Halloran, age 25, died of tuberculosis. Franklin Graves, age 57, died and was cannibalized. Elizabeth Graves, age 47, died and was cannibalized. Franklin Graves Jr., age 5, died and was cannibalized. Jay Fostick, age 23, died and was cannibalized. John Snyder, age 25, was murdered. Joseph Reinhardt, age 30, died and was cannibalized. Augustus Spitzer, age 30, died. Ada Kesselberg, age 3, died. Louis Kesselberg Jr., age 2, died. Sarah Keyes, age 70, died of old age. James Smith, age 25, died and was cannibalized. Bayless Williams, age 24, died. Harriet McCutcheon, age 2, died. Lavinia Murphy, age 50, died and was cannibalized. Landra Murphy, age 15, died and was cannibalized. Lemuel Murphy, age 12, died. George Foster, aged 4, died and was cannibalized. William Pike, age 25, died from an accidental gunshot. Catherine Pike, age 2, she was a twin with Naomi. Naomi lived, but Catherine Pike died. Charles Berger, age 30, died. Patrick Dolan, age 35, died and cannibalized. Charles Stanton, age 35, died. Antonio, age 26, died and was cannibalized. Jacob Wolfinger was murdered. Hardcoop, the elder man, age 60, died. We have to assume. Salvador, age 28, murdered and cannibalized. And Louis, age 19, murdered and cannibalized.
So sad. It really, hearing it all back to back like that, really, it really makes you maybe notice a little. Like, it forces you to recognize how many people that is and how tragic that it was. And it is a horrifying story. It is frightening. It's terrible. But you know what? It does teach us that, you know what, sometimes it's worth it to, to cross all your T's, dot your I's, make sure everything is definitely A-okay. Slow and steady wins the race.
And you know what?
Yeah.
I've got a list of names I certainly wouldn't eat.
Okay. Well, that's kind of nice. I mean, after today, it is nice.
Folks, give it on up for our top-tier Patreon subscribers. Of course, the Dream, James Watkins, the Finished Face Via Lungfist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the Oh-So-Suave Sean Richardson, the British Bone Breaker Bex Martin, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the Killer Stud Carl Staub, the Firestarter Heather Carter, the Conqueror Christopher Damian Damaris, the Awfully Awesome Annie, the Murderous Maggie Leach, the Sir of Sexy Sam Hackworth, the Evil Elizabeth Riley, Lauren Hellfire Hernandez Lopez, the Maniacal Laura Maynard, the Vicious Karen Van Buren, the Arch Nemesis Aaron Bird, the Sadistic Sergio Castillo, the Rapscallion Ryan Crum, the Beast Benjamin Huang, the Devilish Chris Doucette, the Psycho Sam, the Electric Emily Zhang, the Ghoulish Gerd Hankum, the Renegade Corey Ramos, the Crazed Carlos, the Antagonist Andrew Park, the Monstrous Michaela Schur, the Witchy Wonder J.P. Weimer, the Freaky Ben Forsyth, the Barbaric Andrew Barry, the Mysterious Marcella, and the hellacious Carol Hoffman.
I mean, incredible. We love you all. Thank you so much to our top tier Patreon subscribers. You are so great. We love you. Thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers, no matter the tier. And thank you to all of you for listening. We're so appreciative of you. Please spread the good word of Creep Street. Tell your friend, tell your neighbor, tell your chef if you have one, and post about us on social media. And please like, rate, subscribe, give a review, give a rating, anything like that. We appreciate ya.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
Good night and goodbye.
Bye.